value. Like Tony, the speaker before me, I serve within the Office of Process and Facilities within OPQ. And as Tony indicated, our reviewers on a day-to-day basis wear many different hats. Today, I will speak at a high level around the review of facilities, specifically talking towards deficiencies and observations from facility evaluations and inspections. As you all know, a facility is where the rubber meets the road. It's where the API may be synthesized, your drug product manufactured, where both are ultimately packaged, tested, and released. Any gaps in operations at a facility are going to present a risk to product quality and ultimately patient safety. Facility reviews assess application-related concerns related to facilities and identify deficiencies. On the other hand, on-site inspections, including product-specific inspections, lead to observations and citations. Both deficiencies and observations need to be addressed to allow for us to have confidence in the capabilities and conformance to regulations. So today, as a framework, I hope to share and discuss the types of inspections, discuss coverage for each type of inspection, and interpret recommendations that are made. At a high level, I'll talk towards trends and outcomes and citations. We'll dig a little bit deeper into facility assessments supporting ANDAs and common deficiencies. And finally, I leave you with some tips as a wrap-up. So, what is an FDA inspection? It is an official examination of a facility to determine compliance with FDA laws and regulations. Conduct inspections to confirm facts. You might have submitted information in applications, and we are there to confirm that those hold true. We conduct inspections to collect evidence, and then finally assess that information to establish and evaluate conformance. Typically, the inspections are led by field investigators, and as Tony pointed out, reviewers within the Office of Process and Facilities do have opportunities to participate on inspections as subject matter experts. Typically, inspections may last a week or so, but can be extended for specific circumstances. So as you'll see, as I pointed out on the right side of the slide, there are different bases for conducting inspections. Surveillance really encompasses routine inspections. There can be for-cause directed inspections that cover complex topics and target specific issues or concerns. Pre-approval inspections and post-approval inspections are product-specific inspections. Overall, what I'd like you to keep in mind is that an inspection presents an opportunity, kind of like your annual healthcare checkup or well visit. It establishes a baseline for confidence in your ability to make quality product. So really, you're our partner in supporting and establishing our confidence. So as OPF, we do have the opportunity mainly to recommend product-specific inspections, and they usually tie hand in hand with our review or support our review recommendations. So I'm going to talk briefly about product-specific inspections. We may have pre-approval inspections. These are conducted per the compliance program, CPGM 7346-832. I encourage anybody that is submitting applications to take a look at this compliance program. It's publicly available, and then really understand and digest the expectations that we may have of facilities supporting applications. So really, the three fundamental objectives outlined within the compliance program are to establish readiness for manufacturing. We want to be sure that every facility identified in the application is equipped, capable, and ready to manufacture the product as soon as approval is provided. We want to understand also, as part of our pre-approval inspection, your adherence to application information. For example, you may have given us product development studies that are critical. Tony pointed out there were concerns pointed out around extractable leachables. There might be information around stability studies that is key to our assessment. We want to be able to review that data on site. Finally, we want to confirm that the data in the application is authentic and accurate to support our review. So as part of pre-approval inspections, we may look at product development data, registration batch data, manufacturing information, as I mentioned, stability data, and then the ancillary factors that really don't get submitted to us in an application, but really should support product manufacturing. These could include equipment qualifications, could include cleaning, could include laboratory controls, your training programs. All of those do get reviewed at some level as part of pre-approval objectives. We do recognize that as part of application submission, you may not have completed product process validation. For example, you may be at 2A or 2B of process validation that is early on, and that's quite all right. We would look at the data that is available on site. Moving on, the second kind of product-specific inspections that we have an opportunity to recommend are post-approval inspections. They're conducted per center assignment, so we do write and recommend as part of our review post-approval coverage. Typically, it is intended to cover activities that may happen on your site following approval. I mentioned the validation activities. For example, the PPQ batches might be completed prior to product being released to market. We would take a look at that. We would want to confirm that equipment operations and controls are as described in the CMC submission. And if there have been reason to make any changes, they have been adequately supported and are being managed under quality oversight. And they are being reported appropriately. For example, if you've had to make changes to critical process parameters, ranges, outside of what was described in your application as a result of your validation activities, we may expect to see supplements come in. And then last but not the least, we would want to confirm that there have been no significant quality issues that have arisen since approval of the application. So both these kinds of inspections allow us to provide confidence around product quality on site. So I'm going to go at a very high level around over inspection workflow. I know quite a few of you that registered for this meeting do have associations with manufacturing sites, and many of you may have participated in inspections. The workflow I describe is very general. Not all inspections may follow this format, but I just wanted to go through a typical inspection protocol. Typically, an inspection starts or is initiated with the notice of inspection. If it's a domestic inspection, we would issue a form FDA 482 to the most responsible person on site. Investigators will display their credentials. Then typically there will be a discussion around the purpose and agenda for the inspection. The bulk of the inspection happens over the subsequent few days. It could include things around conducting a tour of the facility. We may seek additional details on specific items. We would review or view your operations as they are being performed. We would review records and logbooks and so forth. As needed, evidence and samples could be collected. Typically, most investigators strive to have a daily wrap-up. This allows both parties to have a productive dialogue on items that are, causing some grief, so to say, and also allow for feedback from the site itself with regards to their progress on addressing some of the issues that have been brought up. The inspection typically ends with a closeout meeting. The investigator summarizes the inspection findings. At this point, if necessary and required, if needed, an FDA 483 inspectional observations form might be issued to the firm. The firm may promise corrections. These are documented by the investigator. And really, every attempt is made to ensure that the firm understands their obligations and understands the need, the basis for the inspectional observations. So your role as a partner is really to assist and aid in these activities. So it could be around sharing the requested information, documentation, and providing any other supporting information that could help the investigator understand the approach that is being taken on site. Now, an FDA 483 is used to list significant inspectional observations. So it really is a summary of issues that are in the investigator's judgment, indicating the need for citations. So really it indicates that there may have been circumstances that could lead to adulteration or potential for the same as a result of unacceptable ingredients, unacceptable practices that could introduce contamination, or your facility's practices and methods and controls may not be in conformance with CGMPs to assure safety and quality. So it's really a list of citations from the CFR with supporting evidence. Typically, the 483 list tends to be in the order of importance. Again, I would want to also caution that it's not a comprehensive list of all possible issues that may exist. For example, there may be instances where there's questionable or issues of unknown significance. These may not make it on a 483, but again, as part of your quality oversight, we expect that you are doing your due diligence. So moving on to inspectional classifications. Typically, a surveillance inspection could be classified under three main categories. You could have an NAI classification for inspection. It indicates no action indicated. Typically, in that instance, there are no 483s issued to the firm. A VAI classification also stands for voluntary action indicated. In this situation, there may be 483s issued to the firm. An OAI classification indicates official action indicated. In this case, there may be significant issues that rise or risks that rise to the level of impacting patient safety and marketed product quality. So these are just, terms that you may come across as part of classification, inspectional classification for your facility. From a pre-approval inspection perspective, the investigator may share his recommendation with the inspected facility. We call this, it's also summarized and provided to the agency as an initial field recommendation. It's very important to recognize this is the initial recommendation from the investigator. And so thereafter, there could be the review team or the person reviewing the inspectional outcome would do their due diligence, would look at the responses to the inspectional observations that come through, would look at the inspection report, and then finally provide a recommendation around the approvability of the application from a facility's perspective. So As I mentioned earlier, even in the case of surveillance inspections, the firm's responses to observations typically are expected within 15 business days, and these are all reviewed along with the inspection report to determine a final classification. So I'm providing a link here at the bottom, which is in blue, which is a database link to final classifications for surveillance inspections that you may be able to access for sites within your application. As part of your submission or at the point of approval, I would like to emphasize that facilities need to be in a state of compliance, and this database could be a point for you to check the compliance status of facilities that support your particular application. So I wanted to put a plug in here for the new inspection protocol project, the NIP project. This is a project that the agency is adopting or is taking on at this point. As you know, we continuously try to improve our inspection approaches. The NIP is one such example. The key changes really are from our end. They're really standardizing the inspectional coverage and attempting to deploy a risk and rule-based process using expert questions, really with an intent to inform us about the quality intelligence of sites with regards to their operations and products. So you may see this acronym being shared by an investigator should you, so I just wanted to throw this out. Really, from your perspective, from a firm's perspective, there's no difference with regards to the inspection approach. Really, it is from our end with regards to the conduct of the inspection and reporting. And so the NIP program ideally would end up being seamless from your side. So I'm going to change gears a bit, and I'm going to kind of go very high level through a couple of slides which talk towards trends in inspection outcomes and citations. So first of all, on the left-hand side here, at least on my left-hand side here, I have a screen that shows the total number of inspections conducted by the agency since 2010. And you can see the inspectional burden is in the many thousands and has been pretty steady. So this is for foreign and domestic inspections, and the chart on the first chart here, it really includes inspections for drugs, food, veterinary medicine, radiological health, and multiple other areas. So the chart on the right here actually shows inspection classifications by fiscal year based on the outcome. And the chart goes over a period between 2009 to 2019. As you can see, the drop in 2019 is because we're still collecting data. What I wanted to point out here, and this really only summarizes surveillance and BIMO inspection outcomes, is that majority of the inspections that are conducted tend to be classified NAI, VAI. A very small fraction of inspections, roughly between 4 and 8%, and it's been varying a bit, but it's about where we are, tend to be OAI and need a lot of remedial work from both from y'all as well as the resources from the agency. So a high-level chart that I'm throwing out next really points to the trends in citations between 2015 and 2018. And I didn't put the counts on the y-axis mainly because what I wanted to show you is the same themes tend to repeat themselves as top 10 citations year after year after year. There's some moving around of the frequency, but the key items remain the same. And so in the next 3 slides, I'll talk towards those 3 specific items. So if we go and talk towards the top 3 citations, you can see they tend to remain unchanged. starting with the quality unit oversight being the key one, which talks of, it's really CFR, 21 CFR 211-22D, which has been the main one that we see at the top of the list. It's really around the fact that the processes and procedures may or are typically not seen to be in writing, or they're not adequate, or there are adherence gaps that have been noted. The second area that tends to crop up in the top 3 citations across all years that we've seen is around laboratory controls. Really, the laboratory methods and procedures and controls were noted to be scientifically unsound, or there were gaps in their appropriateness, or their ability to assure that that defects could be identified. And the third area that has cropped up that remains in the top 10 consistently is investigation of discrepancies into failures. So as a site operates, there tend to be aberrant events. And the goal is to understand them, understand the root cause, and institute corrections. However, there tend to be gaps that point to a non-comprehensive address of investigations, and the fact that the impact and the remediation activities are not adequately being captured. So looking a bit further, if you look at an area that's been garnering more attention recently, it's around subpart D equipment. What we're seeing is that 67A and B, 211, 67A and B seem to be cropping up. It's around the need for equipment to be cleaned, maintained at a suitable and appropriate frequency, or that the procedures that are needed for maintaining, sanitizing, cleaning of equipment and utensils are not being adhered to. Another set of citations that relate to this area, subpart D, is around calibrating automated mechanical and electronic equipment to ensure performance. As our equipment systems get more and more automated, the need to ensure that they're appropriately calibrated and functioning to the right metric is very important. And it appears that there are gaps being noted in this area. And lastly, as electronic systems continue to be used, including for production and online data monitoring, the control to such systems really needs to be established and instituted. Another area that we've seen showing up in surveillance citations, from surveillance inspections at a routine frequency seems to be around subpart F, production and process controls. There is a slight downward trend for procedures for sterile drug product that we noted. However, there are still gaps with regards to control procedures that are intended to compensate for variability. Monitoring and validation tend to be insufficient. So these citations have been showing up. And lastly, as I mentioned earlier, the absence of written procedures to support manufacturing operations and process controls are still noted to be a gap. So overall, what does this mean for your facility? I would emphasize, from my perspective, that we do live in a dynamic world where changes are frequent. So really, it becomes very imperative that we have systems, controls, and procedural oversight to ensure that our facilities, or your facilities, remain within a state of control and are operating within required regulations. We encourage you to review events, understand trends, and investigate when needed. As needed, conduct appropriate investigations, ensure they're documented, and that there's scientific evidence supporting your conclusions. And last but not the least, really manage your product life cycle by looking at even post-market information, be it recalls, complaints, field alerts, or your own rejects and OSs. They do point to important information that you can use to further enhance your quality systems and oversight. So I'm going to segue into generic drug facility assessment that is done within our offices. So as a prerequisite, what I definitely want to highlight is that all facilities within your submission should be operating within a state of compliance. And that is a prerequisite to support application approval for 21 CFR 314.127A1. So moving on, I've outlined a very generic application review flow here. So really, an application comes in, and at the point of submission, as mentioned earlier on the Form 356H, we would want to have all the facilities that are supporting the application to be listed. Another key point I'd like to make is that these facilities need to be ready for inspection. There is a little box on the 356H form that by checking off, you are confirming that they're ready for inspection. As part of our review, once an application comes in, there's an initial risk assessment performed by the facility reviewer or the manufacturing reviewer at this point. It really assesses the need for a pre-approval inspection based on product, process, and facility risks. Thereafter, a pre-approval inspection request is communicated to the field. So as part of that request being communicated to the field, there may be additional information communicated. This could be drafted in a memo called the knowledge transfer memo. So the reviewer would communicate with the investigator and highlight areas that would warrant coverage that are product specific as part of the pre-approval inspection. As appropriate, the reviewer may participate on the inspection. Once the inspection happens, there's an inspection report that's written up by the inspection team, and there's a field recommendation that comes through. The facility reviewer or the manufacturing reviewer at that point will take the recommendation from the field, the inspection report, and also any responses that you may provide as to the 483 observations, and make a comprehensive assessment around approvability of the application from a facility's perspective. So in addition to this, what I would point out, as I stated earlier, is there could be possibility of recommending a post-approval inspection based on the risk as part of the review. Another area that's not pointed out in this slide, and that as part of GDUFA 2 we have been charged with, is participating in a pre-facility correspondence assessment. So this is a PFC assessment that is done pre-submission. It allows us to be ready for the reduced timelines associated with applications that are supported by PFCs. On the chart here, I also have a table, and what I wanted to emphasize through the table is that multiple parties, CEDAR, Office of Regulatory Affairs, work pretty closely and communicate extensively as part of the review exercise. At various points, there is information going back and forth that allows for a robust recommendation to be brought to bear on the submission. Just as there are communications within the agency around the need for product-specific or the coverage for product-specific inspections, there's also communications that happen as part of the review between the facility team and you, the sponsor or the applicant. So I've highlighted 3 points at which there are communications that happen. So firstly, at the time of receipt, there is a process in place for timely consult and information requests to go out. This information request could include information, missing information, or request for additional information around facilities within DMFs. It can ask for clarifying information. Primarily, details that you have provided may not be clear. Details you've provided in different parts of the submission may be contradicting each other. There may be information about the supply chain role that's ambiguous, and we may need additional clarity. So a lot of clarifying information is sought at the time of submission receipt, and we really benefit from having a timely response to these requests. Another check-in point is around the mid-cycle review or the mid-review time frame. This goes out within the discipline review letter. For example, if the facility had a pre-approval inspection and there were issues noted, the sponsor may get a communication as part of the DRL that says, there are issues around facilities, and please be informed and really communicate to have this addressed. There may be information going, or requests for information going out to the inspected facility, and this goes out in the form of an RAI. And so you as a sponsor would really want to be in tune with the inspected facility to facilitate appropriate responses to these requests for additional information. At mid-review, you may have submitted amendments that include either new sites or roles. We will look at this information and update our assessments. One caveat here is that goal dates may need to be updated based or depending on the information received. At the end of the review cycle, there is a communication going out through the action letter. So if you see an action letter with no facilities deficiencies, that is great news. If there is a deficiency around facilities, that would have a generic format listing the site and the name of site and the FEI for the facility being included within the action letter. But the inspected facility would get a separate memo from the facility reviewer indicating outstanding issues. So again, communication with the inspected facility becomes important. One thing I would like to highlight here is that the facilities supporting an application are assessed at each review cycle. So when you receive a complete response and come back in with an amendment, we reevaluate facilities. So it's very important that you really stay on top of the compliance status and any concerns around the facilities. So a facility deficiency inadvertently almost always is a major deficiency. It requires a substantial expenditure of FDA resources to reevaluate the facilities, and there is a potential for new inspections in the next cycle. So we do tend to need the time, and so those deficiencies are classified as major. So I'm going to briefly go over the reasons for withhold. You could have a pre-approval withhold. This would be really application specific for a particular site within the application. A site might not be compliant, so you may have a CGMP withhold. There may be risks that remain to be addressed for areas such as a device coverage that is inadequate. So that's something that could be a reason for a facility deficiency. We may become aware that a particular facility is not performing a certain function. So you may have a deficiency that states the facility is not performing the function. A facility we went to inspect may have stated they're not ready. So you may have one of the facility not ready deficiencies. And lastly, you may have one where it says, you're missing a critical facility. So this could be a facility that's actually within a DMF and not listed in the ANDA. And so in that situation, in place of the name of the facility, we would typically say the facility referenced in the DMF. So as I pointed out earlier, pre-approval really is pre-approval inspections really are a cornerstone for application approval for high-risk applications. And so really there are reasons why a pre-approval inspection may result in a withhold. The CPGM, the compliance policy guidance that I referenced earlier, guidance manual that I referenced earlier, actually within Part 5 has the withhold reasons. I kind of flipped them around and I kind of phrased them in a way where you would kind of keep these strategies in mind to increase your success for a increase your chances of success for a successful pre-approval inspection. So really work with your manufacturing site to ensure you have the right equipment and controls present. They're operational. You have instructions for manufacturing and control, and detailed instructions are incorporated within your batch records, and they're supported by your development studies. Ensure you have complete successful method validation or verification. The validation needs to be representative. If there are changes, please make sure they're instituted and they're incorporated. And last but not the least, we really struggle in scenarios where there's missing information or misrepresented information or non-representative information for submission batches, be it stability, processing conditions, be batch information. So make sure that there is consistent information that is being submitted and there is appropriate supporting information on site. So as a wrap up, what I would encourage you to do is to adopt a holistic, systematic process for the assessment, control, communication, review of risk to product quality across the life cycle. And secondly, take a proactive approach towards management of facility risk, and that will ensure patient access to quality medicines and sustain market success. So with that, I'd like to wrap up, and I think we're going to go to the panel. So while we do that, acknowledgments to everybody within my office,